All right, everybody, give Grace your attention.
I don't know why you're laughing.
All right. According to AbsoluteDigitizing.com, embroidery has been present in nearly every single culture dating back to 30,000 BC, where it was found on the remains of a Russian ruler. And since then, in every single culture, it has been found on the clothing of rulers and wealthy people, and jewels and beads were actually threaded onto the embroidery floss. I personally have not been embroidering for 30,000 years, but I have been embroidering for about 3 years, and I love making gifts for myself and others, like this sweatshirt that I embroidered.
Oh, cool.
And so today I'm going to show you how I plan, prepare, and execute an embroidery project. So the first thing you need to do is to gather all your materials. So I have this fabric that I'm going to be embroidering today, and all of my prices are going to be from Walmart.com. So a quarter of yard of fabric at Walmart is about $1. The next thing you need is an embroidery hoop, which will keep your fabric nice and tight when you embroider. And this is going to be $2 to $3 depending on the size of your hoop. There are bigger and smaller ones. And then you will need a needle. So embroidery needles are $2 or $3 for a pack of 3 to 5. And embroidery needles are actually different than regular needles because of the eye of the needle. So if a regular needle has a circular eye, an embroidery needle has a oblong oval shaped eye. And that is because of the kind of thread that you use to embroider. It's called embroidery floss, and it's not just one thread, it's 6 pieces of thread put together. And this is to create a nice thick, bold line when you're embroidering. So supplies for embroidery, as you can tell, are relatively cheap. So a pack of 36 different colors of embroidery floss is going to be about $5. And they last a very long time, depending on how you use them. So the first thing you have to do to start your project is to come up with your design. So today I will be embroidering a smiley face. And I usually will draw my design out ahead of time, but today I'm just going to go straight onto the fabric, and usually I would use a pencil or some sort of marker that can easily be scrubbed off after the design is embroidered, but today I'm just going to use a Sharpie so that everybody can see my lines. So I'm just going to draw my smiley face on. And then the next thing you need to do is thread your needle. So like I said, embroidery floss is 6 different pieces of thread to put together, which can make it kind of tricky to thread your needle sometime. But I like to take the end of my floss, twist it together, and then pinch it between my thumb and forefinger, and then just push it in between the needle. And it's very important that you get all 6 strings to go through the eye of the needle. And then I'm just going to leave 4 or 5 inches hanging off the side, and then I'm going to tie a knot at the end. So how I'm going to do that is I'm just going to create a circle, and then push the end of my thread through that circle, and then I'm going to do that one more time to create a double knot. And it's very important that the knot of your thread is thicker than the eye of your needle so it doesn't pull through. And now we can start actually embroidering. So when you approach your design, you have to figure out what kind of stitches are going to work best for each part. So for the eyes, I'm actually going to use a French knot, which, as you can see, is the middle of each of these flowers on my sleeve here. But it creates a knot on top of the fabric, so a nice stitch to use for any kind of circle. So I'm going to start every single one of my stitches today by going up through the bottom of the fabric, right in the middle of the eye, and I'm just going to pull all the way through. And then what I'm going to do to create the knot part is I'm going to put my needle face up, pointing away from the fabric, and I'm going to loop my floss around it 3 times. And then, while keeping that looped on there, I'm going to go back into my fabric right next to where I came up, and then I'm just going to pull straight through, and it will create a knot right on top of my fabric. And then I'm going to do that one more time for my other eye. So go up to the bottom of the fabric, pull it tight, point my needle away, loop 3 times, and then go back down to the fabric. And that will create my second eye. And then for the smile, I think that the best stitch to use to create a nice bold line is called a stem stitch. And it's what I've used for all of my lines on the sleeve and also the outline of my heart here. So I'm going to go up on the end of the smile, and I'm going to create a stitch that's about 1/3 to 1/2 of an inch long. And I'm just going to go back down like any sewing stitch you do. But then instead of leaving a gap and then coming up for my next stitch, I'm actually going to go back and go put my needle up in between some of the stitches of my some of the pieces of thread of my previous stitch. And then I'm just going to create my second stitch there. And so as you can see, it creates a nice, bold, continuous line. And then I'm going to continue to do that for the rest of my smile. So an embroidery machine that you would use as a fabric in any sort of factory is going to create anywhere from 500 to 1,000 stitches every single minute. And according to the embroiderywarehouse.com, the average embroiderer, myself included, does anywhere from 10 to 30 stitches per minute, which, as you can tell, is significantly less. Embroidery is a very slow process, but the repetition is what draws a lot of people to it because it can be very therapeutic. Sometimes when I'm embroidering, I put on a TV show or a podcast and just sit and do the same repetitive task over and over. It can be very therapeutic. So when I finish my last stitch, I'm going to go back to the back side to tie off. And how I do that is I go underneath any of the stitches that are on the back, put my needle there, and before I pull this thread all the way through, I'm going to take this loop that I've created and stick my needle through it and pull tight. And just like at the beginning, I'm going to do that a second time to create a double knot. And so, because of embroidery's simplistic nature, and because the materials are relatively cheap, and because it's straightforward, there's absolutely no wonder why embroidery has withstood the test of time. And that's because absolutely no one can resist a gift from the heart.